The Caltharian Empire stretched across 14 star systems, its iron grip maintained through a simple principle: absolute fear. For 3 centuries, the reptilian Calthari had ruled their territories with calculated brutality, ensuring that every subject species understood the consequences of defiance. Their warships patrolled the void between worlds, their soldiers enforced compliance on every colonized planet, and their governors administered justice with merciless efficiency. Captain Vextor stood on the command deck of the dreadnought Shadowfall, watching the blue marble of Earth grow larger in the viewscreen. The third planet of this unremarkable system had been under Caltharian control for only 18 months, but already the native species, humans, they called themselves, had proven troublesome. 3 separate uprising attempts, countless acts of sabotage, and a stubborn refusal to accept their place in the Empire's hierarchy. Status report, Vextor commanded, his forked tongue tasting the recycled air of the bridge. His scaled hands gripped the command rail as junior officers scurried about their duties. The latest rebellion on the northern continent has been suppressed, Captain, reported Subcommander Krelgax. Governor Thane's forces eliminated the resistance cell in what the humans call Detroit. However, local compliance remains at only 63%. Vextor's yellow eyes narrowed. 63% was unacceptable. On properly governed worlds, compliance rates never fell below 90%. The humans were proving more resilient than anticipated, and their resistance was becoming an embarrassment to the Empire. Other subject species might begin to think rebellion was possible. What methods has Governor Thane employed? Vextor asked. Standard pacification protocols, sir. Public executions, labor conscription, destruction of cultural sites. The usual measures that prove effective on most species. Yet the humans continue to resist. Yes, sir. Intelligence reports suggest they possess an unusual psychological trait. They appear to become more determined when faced with oppression rather than more compliant. It's unprecedented. Vextor had heard similar reports from other human-occupied systems. The species seemed to possess an illogical tendency toward sacrifice for abstract concepts like freedom and dignity. Such notions were counterproductive to efficient governance. Perhaps stronger measures were needed. The calm system crackled to life, Governor Thane's harsh voice filling the bridge. Captain Vextor, I require immediate orbital support. We have another situation developing. Explain, Vextor commanded. A group of human children attempted to sabotage one of our processing facilities. My security forces intercepted them, but, during the arrest, one of the young humans was killed. The local population is reacting poorly. Vextor felt a familiar satisfaction. Dead resistors served as excellent examples to the living. How many casualties among our forces? None, sir. But that's not the issue. The humans are gathering in large numbers. They're not dispersing despite our warnings. And, sir, they're not showing fear. They're showing something else. Through the viewscreen, Vextor could see the lights of Earth's cities, scattered across the planet's surface like glowing dots. Each light represented thousands of humans, and, if the reports were accurate, each human represented a potential problem for the Empire's stability. I'm transmitting the incident report now, Governor Thane continued. The dead human was apparently only 12 years old by their measurement system. The other children claimed they were only trying to recover food supplies for their families. Irrelevant, Vextor replied. Sabotage is sabotage regardless of the perpetrator's age. You acted correctly, Governor. Sir, with respect, I don't think you understand the gravity of this situation. The humans have a particular attachment to their young. This incident is spreading across their communication networks faster than we can contain it. Every major population center is reporting gatherings. Vextor studied the tactical display showing Earth's continents. Red markers were appearing across the globe, each representing a growing concentration of humans. The pattern was unlike anything in his experience. Typically, when the Empire made examples of resistors, populations cowered and complied. These humans seemed to be doing the opposite. Governor, maintain standard containment protocols. If the humans wish to gather in convenient groups for processing, accommodate them. Prepare detention facilities for mass arrests. Sir, I don't think you understand. I understand perfectly, Vextor cut him off. The humans are testing our resolve. We will demonstrate that the Caltharian Empire does not negotiate with terrorists, regardless of their age or motivation. He terminated the communication and turned to his tactical officer. Prepare landing forces. Full battle configuration. If these humans want a demonstration of Imperial power, we'll provide one they won't forget. Subcommander Krelgax shifted uncomfortably. Sir, our xenopsychologists have filed some unusual reports about human behavior patterns. Perhaps we should review them before xenopsychology is irrelevant when facing rebellion, Vextor snapped. The Empire has maintained order for 3 centuries using proven methods. Fear is universal. Pain is universal. Death is universal. These humans will learn, or they will be replaced by a more compliant species. The shadowfall descended through Earth's atmosphere, its massive bolt casting shadows across entire cities. Similar ships took positions over other population centers, their weapon arrays trained on the gathering crowds below. Standard Imperial doctrine called for overwhelming displays of force to break enemy morale before significant resistance could organize. But, as Vextor studied the feeds from the surface, something nagged at him. The humans weren't scattering. They weren't hiding. Instead, they were gathering in even larger numbers, and their body language suggested not fear but determination. Some were carrying images of the dead child, others were constructing makeshift memorials. Sir, reported the communications officer, we're intercepting massive amounts of human transmissions. They're organizing across their entire planet. Content? The translations are unusual, sir. They keep repeating phrases like remember Sarah Chen and no more children. They appear to be sharing information about the incident and coordinating their response. Vextor frowned. Coordinated resistance required leadership, organization, and communication networks. The Empire had specifically targeted all 3 during the initial occupation. Yet somehow the humans were managing to organize anyway, using methods that didn't fit standard resistance patterns. Governor Thane reports that the child's name was Sarah Chen, the communications officer continued. The humans have identified her as some sort of symbol. A symbol of what? Of innocence, sir. And of imperial injustice. The concept made no sense to Vextor. Children were simply small adults, potential workers or soldiers depending on their species' characteristics. The death of one child should have been meaningless in the larger context of maintaining order. Yet the humans were treating it as something significant. Sir, incoming transmission from Fleet Command, announced another officer. Admiral Korth's image appeared on the main screen, his scarred features twisted in annoyance. Captain, I'm receiving reports of unusual activity in your sector. Explain. Standard pacification operations, Admiral. The humans are conducting some form of organized protest, but our forces are prepared to suppress it. Protests? Admiral Korth's tone grew dangerous. Captain, the humans in 3 other systems have begun similar activities. They're calling it something in their language that translates to uprising for the innocent. Our xenopsychologists are recommending extreme caution. Vextor felt a chill run down his spine. If humans across multiple systems were coordinating, the implications were staggering. No subject species had ever managed such widespread organization under imperial occupation. What are your orders, Admiral? Crush this immediately. Use whatever force necessary. The Empire cannot appear weak in front of other subject species. If the humans think they can challenge us over the death of one child, we'll show them the consequences of such thinking. Understood, Admiral. As the transmission ended, Vextor turned to study the tactical display again. The red markers representing human gatherings had multiplied, and now covered almost every major population center on the planet. Preliminary estimates suggested that nearly 1 billion humans were participating in whatever this phenomenon was. Sir, reported the sensor officer, we're detecting unusual energy signatures from the human gatherings. They appear to be broadcasting something. Content? Audio and visual feeds, sir. The dead child's image, along with what our translators identify as historical references to human resistance movements. They're also broadcasting something they call names of the innocent. Vextor didn't understand the significance, but something about the situation felt different from previous rebellions. The humans weren't hiding or running. They weren't even fighting in the traditional sense. They were simply gathering and remembering. Begin deployment of ground forces, he commanded. Disperse these gatherings using standard riot suppression techniques. If they resist, escalate to lethal force. Sir, Subcommander Krelgax spoke up again, the xenopsychology reports specifically warn against harming human young. They suggest it triggers an unusual response pattern called protective rage. Perhaps we should execute my orders, Vextor cut him off. The Empire does not negotiate with emotions. As the first Caltharian dropships descended toward Earth's surface, Vextor felt confident that this latest human resistance would be crushed like all the others. Fear was universal. Terror was effective. The Empire had proven this across dozens of species and hundreds of worlds. He had no way of knowing that humans were about to prove him catastrophically wrong. The first dropships touched down in what humans called Times Square, their armored hulls gleaming under the artificial lights of the human city. Caltharian soldiers emerged in full battle gear, their plasma weapons charged and ready. The crowd of humans didn't flee. Instead, they pressed closer, holding images of Sarah Chen and chanting something in unison. Captain Morthak, leading the ground assault, activated his translation system. The humans were chanting "Say her name" over and over, their voices growing louder as more soldiers deployed. Disperse immediately, Morthak commanded through his suit's external speakers. Return to your dwellings or face arrest. The humans didn't move. An elderly female pushed through the crowd, approaching the Caltharian line with something in her hands. Morthak tensed, expecting a weapon, but the object appeared to be some sort of image. As she drew closer, he could see it was a photograph of the dead child, smiling. Her name was Sarah Chen, the old human said, her voice carrying across the sudden silence. She was 12 years old. She liked to draw pictures of stars and wanted to become an astronomer. She tried to get food for her hungry neighbors, and you killed her for it. Morthak found the speech confusing. The child's ambitions and interests were irrelevant to the situation. She had committed sabotage and paid the appropriate price. Why were the humans dwelling on irrelevant details? Disperse now, he repeated, raising his weapon. Final warning. The old human didn't move. Instead, she held up the photograph higher. Say her name, she called out. Sarah Chen, roared the crowd in response. The volume was deafening, and more humans were arriving every moment. Similar scenes were playing out across the globe as Caltharian forces encountered the same bewildering response. The humans weren't fighting back in any tactical sense, but they weren't complying either. From orbit, Captain Vextor watched the feeds with growing unease. Standard suppression techniques were proving ineffective. The humans seemed immune to intimidation, and their numbers were growing instead of diminishing. Sir, we're receiving similar reports from all landing sites, reported his communications officer. The humans are refusing to disperse, and they're all repeating the same behavior patterns. What patterns? They're sharing information about the dead child. Personal details, images, stories. They're treating her as if she was significant to all of them, not just her family group. Vextor struggled to understand. Among the Calthari, death was a private matter for immediate family. The idea that strangers would care about an unrelated child's death was alien to him. Yet the evidence was undeniable. Somehow, Sarah Chen's death had become important to humans she had never met, across distances she had never traveled. Orders, sir, asked Subcommander Krelgax. Vextor studied the feeds from the surface. The humans showed no signs of backing down, and their numbers continued to grow. Standard Imperial doctrine called for escalation, but something about the situation felt unprecedented. For the first time in his career, Captain Vextor wasn't certain that terror would prove adequate to the task. Unknown to him, in the depths of human space and, in colonies across a dozen systems, similar gatherings were forming. The death of Sarah Chen was spreading through human networks faster than Imperial forces could track or suppress. And, with each telling, each image shared, each name spoken, something was building that the Caltharian Empire had never encountered before. The humans were not just mourning a child. They were remembering who they had been before the conquest, and deciding who they wanted to be afterward. The Empire was about to discover that some things were more powerful than terror. And some debts could only be paid in full. The human gathering in Times Square had swelled to over 50,000 people, and Captain Morthak was beginning to understand why his xenopsychology briefings had included warnings about human behavior. The crowd wasn't acting like any defeated population he'd encountered in 15 years of Imperial service. They weren't cowering or pleading or trying to negotiate. They were simply standing there, holding pictures of a dead child, and refusing to leave. Phase 2, he commanded into his comm unit. Deploy crowd control measures. Caltharian soldiers activated their sonic dispersal weapons, filling the air with frequencies designed to cause discomfort and panic in most species. The humans flinched and covered their ears, but they didn't run. Instead, they linked arms and continued chanting. Say her name. Sarah Chen. How did she die? Murdered by the Empire. The call and response pattern was spreading through the crowd like wildfire, and Morthak realized with growing alarm that the humans had somehow turned his intimidation tactics into fuel for their resistance. Each escalation seemed to make them more determined rather than less. Sir, reported his second-in-command, similar patterns reported from all deployment sites. The humans are not responding to standard suppression measures. From orbit, Captain Vextor watched the feeds with mounting frustration. Across Earth's surface, nearly 2 billion humans had now joined the gatherings. The numbers were staggering, representing the largest coordinated resistance action in Imperial history. And, at the center of it all was the image of one human child. Status report from other systems, he demanded. Admiral Korth reports that humans in the Proxima, Wolf 359, and Kepler systems have initiated similar gatherings. They're using some form of instantaneous communication network we haven't been able to trace or intercept. Impossible. We control all communication infrastructure in occupied systems. Apparently not all of it, sir. Intelligence suggests the humans have been using quantum entanglement communication devices hidden in everyday objects. The network has been operational since before the conquest, but dormant. Vextor felt his blood run cold. A hidden communication network meant the humans had been planning resistance from the beginning, waiting for the right moment to activate it. The death of Sarah Chen hadn't created this response, it had triggered something that was already in place. Sir, incoming priority transmission from the High Command. The image of Supreme Admiral Korax appeared on the main screen, his ancient features carved with the wisdom and cruelty of centuries. Behind him stood the shadowy figures of the Imperial Council, their presence alone enough to make junior officers tremble. Captain Vextor, Korax's voice carried the weight of absolute authority. Explain how one dead human child has paralyzed 4 star systems. Supreme Admiral, the humans have demonstrated an unprecedented resistance to standard pacification measures. They appear to have formed an emotional attachment to the deceased child despite having no personal connection to her. Emotional attachment? Korax's tone grew dangerous. Captain, are you suggesting that the mighty Caltharian Empire is being challenged by feelings? Sir, the xenopsychology reports, I've read the reports. Human emotional responses to perceived injustice. Pack bonding with strangers. Irrational protective instincts. Theoretical nonsense. What matters is that nearly 3 billion humans across 4 systems have stopped working, stopped cooperating, and started gathering in coordinated defiance of Imperial authority. Vextor's heart sank. 3 billion humans represented an economic loss that would cripple several sectors of the Imperial economy. Human labor had become crucial to the Empire's expansion, their surprising adaptability and work capacity making them valuable assets. But only if they could be controlled. Your orders, Supreme Admiral? End this. Immediately. Use whatever force necessary. The other subject species are watching, Captain. If humans can defy the Empire over the death of one child, what's to stop the Drachmae from rebelling over mining quotas? What's to stop the Velthari from refusing tribute payments? The entire imperial structure depends on the belief that resistance is futile. Understood, sir. Captain, Korax continued, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than a shout, if this human resistance is not crushed within 24 hours, I will personally ensure that Earth becomes a cautionary tale for the next 1,000 years. Every human city will burn. Every human settlement will be glass. Do I make myself clear? Crystal clear, Supreme Admiral. The transmission ended, leaving Vextor alone with the weight of genocide hanging over his shoulder. The Empire had sterilized worlds before. 17 planets in the past century had been rendered lifeless por encourager les autres. But Earth's 3 billion humans represented the largest potential massacre in Imperial history. He opened a channel to all Caltharian forces in the system. All units, this is Captain Vextor. Implementing Protocol 7. Repeat, Protocol 7 is now active. A hush fell over the bridge. Protocol 7 was the Empire's most extreme pacification measure, the systematic elimination of civilian populations until resistance ceased. It had never been used on such a scale, but the mathematics were simple. Kill enough humans, and the survivors would submit. Sir, Subcommander Krelgax spoke carefully, Protocol 7 requires the elimination of 1% of the target population every hour until compliance is achieved. On Earth, that's 30 million humans per hour. I'm aware of the mathematics, Vextor replied. Begin with the largest gatherings. Make sure the deaths are visible to the remaining populations. As Caltharian warships moved into bombardment positions, something unprecedented happened on Earth's surface. The human gatherings didn't disperse when the ships appeared overhead. Instead, they grew larger. Captain Morthak watched in disbelief as more humans poured into Times Square, even as the shadow of the dreadnought Nightmare fell across the city. The humans could see the weapon arrays charging, could hear the whine of energy building in the plasma cannons, yet they kept coming. Why aren't they running? Asked his lieutenant. Morthak had no answer. Every military manual, every xenopsychology text, every historical precedent suggested that civilians faced with overwhelming firepower would flee or surrender. These humans seemed to be doing neither. An elderly human male pushed through the crowd, carrying something in his weathered hands. As he approached the Caltharian line, Morthak could see it was another photograph, not of Saracen this time, but of a different child. Her name was Emily Rodriguez, the old human called out, his voice somehow carrying over the noise of the crowd. She was 8 years old when your forces killed her parents on Mars. She died alone in the refugee camps because you wouldn't let medical supplies through. He held the photograph higher, and somehow the massive crowd fell silent. Say her name, he commanded. Emily Rodriguez. Another human stepped forward, holding a different picture. His name was David Kim. 14 years old. Shot while trying to protect his little sister from your soldiers. David Kim. More pictures emerged from the crowd. More names were spoken. Morthak realized with growing horror that the humans weren't just mourning Sarah Chen, they were remembering every child the Empire had killed since the conquest began. Thousands of names, thousands of faces, all held up like accusations against the night sky. Sir, his lieutenant whispered, they're documenting our operations. The implications hit Morthak like a physical blow. The humans had been recording imperial atrocities from the beginning, cataloging every death, every abuse, every casual cruelty inflicted by occupation forces. The death of Sarah Chen hadn't created their resistance, it had given them permission to reveal it. Above, the Nightmare's main batteries finished charging. The plasma cannons swiveled toward the crowd, their targeting systems painting red dots across thousands of human faces. But, still, the humans didn't run. Instead, they began to sing. Morthak's translation system struggled with the melody, but the words came through clearly. It was something called Amazing Grace, and, as the voices rose in harmony, more humans throughout the city took up the song. The melody spread beyond Times Square, carried by the hidden communication network to every gathering across the globe. For the first time in his career, Captain Morthak hesitated before carrying out an order. "Fire," came Vextor's voice through the calm. Morthak looked at the targeting display, showing thousands of human heat signatures packed into the square below. Men, women, children, all standing together in defiance of the Empire's might. All singing the same impossible song. Captain Morthak, fire immediately. But something had changed in the last few minutes. Morthak found himself thinking about the xenopsychology reports he'd dismissed earlier, the warnings about human behavior patterns that made no tactical sense. Pack bonding. Emotional contagion. Protective rage triggered by threats to the young. The humans below weren't just mourning Sarah Chen anymore. They were mourning all their dead, and their grief had transformed into something the Empire had never encountered: fearless determination born of righteous anger. Captain Morthak. Morthak's finger moved toward the firing control, but stopped as a new image appeared in the crowd below. A human female had stepped forward, holding not a photograph but a living child, a girl who couldn't have been more than 5 years old. "Her name is Hope Chen," the woman called out. "She's Sarah's little sister. She's 5 years old, and she wants to know why you killed her sister for trying to feed hungry people." The child looked up at the Caltharian ships with eyes that held no fear, only curiosity and sadness. In that moment, Morthak saw something that shattered his understanding of warfare: an enemy who could make soldiers question the justice of their cause. "Captain Morthak, you are ordered to fire immediately." Morthak's fingers still hesitated on the control. Around him, his soldiers were staring at the same feed, seeing the same impossible scene. An entire species standing unafraid in the face of annihilation, their children among them, singing songs of grace and holding pictures of the innocent dead. "Sir," his lieutenant whispered, "are we really going to murder children who are singing lullabies?" The question hung in the air like poison. Because that's what Protocol 7 meant, stripped of military euphemisms and tactical language. They were being ordered to kill children who had done nothing but exist in defiance of the Empire's will. From orbit, Captain Vextor watched the hesitation in his ground forces and felt something he'd never experienced before: doubt. Not about imperial authority or the necessity of maintaining order, but about whether the humans could actually be defeated using conventional methods. They had transformed the simple act of remembering their dead into a weapon more powerful than any plasma cannon. They had turned their grief into armor that deflected the Empire's greatest strength: fear. "All units, fire on my mark," Vextor commanded, his voice carrying across the fleet communication network. Mark. But, for the first time in Caltharian military history, the order was not immediately obeyed. Across Earth's surface, Caltharian soldiers found themselves staring at crowds of humans who had chosen to stand with their dead rather than flee from their executioners. The Empire had ruled through terror for 3 centuries, but terror required fear to function. And the humans below were demonstrating something that made terror impossible: the willingness to die with dignity rather than live in shame. What happened next would determine whether the Caltharian Empire could survive its first encounter with an enemy that refused to be afraid. In the depths of space, hidden communication arrays carried the images of Earth's defiance to every human settlement across the galaxy. On distant worlds and orbital stations, in mining colonies and research facilities, humans watched their homeworld stand up to the Empire's might. And, slowly, quietly, they began to make their own plans. The Empire had taught them that resistance was futile. The humans were about to teach the Empire what happened when an entire species decided that some things were worth dying for. Sarah Chen's death had lit a fuse that stretched across the galaxy. Now it was time to see what explosion would follow. The moment of hesitation stretched across the Caltharian fleet like a crack in armor. Captain Vextor could see it in the tactical displays, could hear it in the calm chatter, could feel it in the sudden uncertainty that infected his own thoughts. For 30 seconds that felt like hours, the mightiest military force in known space hesitated before a crowd of civilians holding photographs. Then, Captain Morthak's voice cut through the silence: "I cannot comply with this order." The words hit the fleet communication network like an electromagnetic pulse. Shocked gasps echoed across dozens of bridges as junior officers processed what they'd just heard. A Caltharian officer had refused a direct order to fire on enemy targets. "Repeat that, Captain," Vextor said, his voice deadly quiet. "I said I cannot comply, sir. These are not enemy combatants. These are civilians mourning their dead. There is no tactical justification for Captain Morthak, you are relieved of command. Major Grixtal, assume command of ground forces and execute Protocol 7 immediately." But Major Grixtal's response came slowly, reluctantly. "Sir, my men are requesting clarification of target parameters. The crowd contains what appear to be human young." Vextor's patience snapped. "The target parameters are every human in the designated areas. Age is irrelevant. Compliance will be achieved through overwhelming casualties." A new voice joined the comm channel, Colonel Vorthake from the cruiser Iron Fist. "Captain Vextor, my tactical officer is reporting that the human gatherings now include children as young as 2 years old." "Are we really?" "You are ordered to fire. All of you. These are not requests, these are direct commands from Imperial High Command." But something had fundamentally shifted in the last few minutes. Across the fleet, Caltharian officers found themselves staring at tactical displays showing children holding flowers, elderly humans singing hymns, families standing together in the face of certain death. The Empire's propaganda had never prepared them for an enemy that brought their young to face overwhelming firepower. Sub-Commander Krelgax approached Vextor's command station. "Sir, perhaps we should reconsider the tactical approach. The humans appear to be using their young as some form of psychological warfare." Psychological warfare?" Vextor turned on his subordinate with fury blazing in his yellow eyes. "They're civilians. They have no weapons, no defenses, no ability to harm us. How can unarmed children constitute psychological warfare?" But, even as he said it, Vextor realized the answer. The humans had found the one weapon that could penetrate Caltharian military conditioning, moral doubt. By placing their children among the protesters, they had transformed a simple crowd control operation into something that violated every instinct evolution had bred into intelligent species, the protection of the young. "Sir," reported the communications officer, "we're receiving incoming transmissions from across the fleet. Multiple units are requesting confirmation of target priorities." "Show me." The main screen filled with feeds from across Earth's surface. In every major city, the pattern was the same: massive crowds of humans holding pictures of dead children, singing songs of mourning and defiance, and facing Caltharian weapons without fear. But now there was something else. In every crowd, human children stood at the front, their small hands holding flowers and candles. "They're using their young as shields," someone whispered. "No," Sub-Commander Krelgax said quietly. "They're teaching their young to be brave." The distinction hit the bridge crew like a physical blow. Military doctrine could handle enemy combatants using civilians as shields. It was a cowardly but comprehensible tactic. But teaching children to face death with courage was something else entirely. It spoke to a depth of conviction that the Empire's xenopsychologists had never properly documented. "Sir, urgent message from Admiral Korth." The Admiral's scarred face appeared on the screen, his expression grim. "Captain, I'm receiving reports of similar hesitation across all fleets in human space. Our forces are requesting clarification of engagement parameters when targets include enemy young." "Sir, the humans have deliberately placed their offspring in target zones. Standard doctrine calls for it. Standard doctrine assumes rational behavior from civilian populations. These humans appear to be acting irrationally, and it's affecting our tactical efficiency." Admiral Korth paused, studying something off-screen. "Captain, I'm uploading new intelligence data. Review it immediately." The data package that arrived painted a picture that chilled Vextor to his core. Human resistance networks across 4 star systems had activated simultaneously, triggered by news of Sarachen's death. But this wasn't random uprising, it was a coordinated response that had been planned for months, possibly years. Hidden weapon caches were being revealed on dozens of worlds. Sleeper agents embedded in Imperial infrastructure were activating. Most disturbing of all, humans working in critical Imperial facilities were simply walking away from their posts, abandoning essential services that kept the Empire's war machine functioning. "Sir," his intelligence officer reported, "we're losing operational capacity across multiple sectors. Human technicians are refusing to maintain our equipment. Human translators are abandoning their posts. Human administrators are deleting critical databases before disappearing." Vextor studied the reports with growing alarm. The Empire had never faced this problem before because other conquered species had been motivated by fear and self-preservation. Remove their leaders, threaten their families, and most populations would comply rather than face extinction. The humans were choosing extinction. Captain, Admiral Korth continued, "Supreme Command has been monitoring the situation. The economic impact of this resistance is already approaching critical levels. We need human cooperation to maintain current operations in their sectors. Then, we force compliance through escalated pressure. With what leverage? They're already willing to die. Their children are standing in front of our weapons, and their parents are teaching them to sing while they wait. What greater threat can we offer?" It was a question that cut to the heart of Imperial power. The Caltharian Empire had conquered dozens of species through the simple application of overwhelming force followed by the threat of greater force. But, force only worked against enemies who feared death more than they valued their principles. "New orders from Supreme Command," Admiral Korth said. "Suspend Protocol 7 pending tactical reassessment. We need to understand what we're dealing with before we risk turning 3 billion humans into martyrs." Martyrs? Vextor didn't understand the concept. It's a human term for those who die for their beliefs. Intelligence suggests that human culture places extraordinary value on such deaths. Killing them might actually strengthen resistance rather than end it. As the immediate threat of bombardment lifted, something unexpected happened on Earth's surface. The human crowds didn't celebrate or disperse. Instead, they grew larger. Word of the Empire's hesitation spread through the hidden communication networks faster than Imperial forces could track it, and humans began emerging from hiding places they'd occupied for months. In Times Square, Captain Morthak watched in amazement as the crowd swelled to over 250,000 people. They came from every direction, through subway tunnels the Empire thought it had sealed, from buildings supposedly under surveillance, from sewers and maintenance shafts and forgotten passages that honeycombed the human city. "Sir," his lieutenant reported, "motion sensors are detecting movement throughout the urban infrastructure. The humans have been living in spaces we didn't know existed." Morthak studied the tactical display and realized with sick certainty that the Empire had never truly controlled Earth's cities. They had occupied the obvious spaces, government buildings, major intersections, communication hubs, but the humans had simply moved into the hidden spaces between. Like water flowing around stones, they had adapted to occupation by becoming invisible. "How many?" he asked. "Unknown, sir. Our estimates of human population may have been significantly understated." The implications were staggering. If the Empire's population counts were wrong, then their resource calculations were wrong, their labor projections were wrong, their entire occupation strategy was based on flawed data. From orbit, Vextor watched feeds from dozens of human cities and saw the same pattern repeating. Everywhere Imperial forces had established control, humans were emerging from hiding to join the crowds. Not just hundreds or thousands, but millions upon millions of humans that Imperial census had never counted. "Communications, patch me through to all human gathering points. Full translation protocol." "Sir? I'm going to talk to them." The massive screens that Imperial forces had installed for propaganda purposes flickered to life across Earth's surface. Vextor's scaled features appeared before billions of human eyes, his yellow gaze stern with authority. "Humans of Earth," he began, his words translated into dozens of human languages, "you are in violation of Imperial law. Your gatherings are unauthorized. Your refusal to disperse constitutes rebellion against lawful authority." The crowds fell silent, but they didn't move. The death of the human juvenile Sarah Chen was the result of lawful enforcement action. she was engaged in sabotage of Imperial property. The consequences of her actions were clearly established under Imperial law. A sound rose from the crowds then, not quite a roar, not quite a moan, but something that made every Caltharian soldier's scales prickle with unease. It was the sound of billions of humans rejecting his words simultaneously. However, Vextor continued, the Empire recognizes that cultural differences may have led to misunderstanding of proper procedures. If you disperse peacefully and return to your designated activities, no further action will be taken against gathering participants. The sound grew louder, resolving into words that chilled Vextor's blood. Say her name. Sarah Chan. Murdered by the Empire. But, then, something new was added, remember the innocent. And, suddenly, every human in every crowd was holding up pictures of children, not just Sarah Chen, but thousands of other human young who had died during the occupation. The scope of their record-keeping was breathtaking. They had documented everything, remembered everyone, and now they were sharing their grief with the galaxy. Sir, his communications officer reported with growing alarm, the human transmissions are being broadcast beyond Earth. We're detecting reception points in every system with a human population. Vextor realized with horror that this moment was being watched by humans throughout Imperial space. Every word, every gesture, every decision was being broadcast to potential resistance cells across the galaxy. Cut the transmission. Sir, we can't. They're using quantum entanglement relays embedded in our own communication infrastructure. The humans who built our networks included backdoors we never detected. The magnitude of human planning became clear. This wasn't a spontaneous uprising triggered by a child's death. This was the culmination of months of preparation, waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves. Sarah Chen's death hadn't created the resistance, it had given it permission to emerge from hiding. Admiral Korth, to all Imperial forces in human space, came the urgent transmission. We have reports of coordinated uprising activities across 17 systems. Human populations are abandoning their posts and gathering in massive demonstrations. Repeat, this is a galaxy-wide event. Vextor stared at the tactical display showing Earth's defiant cities, then, at the reports flooding in from across human space. In a single day, the Empire had lost control of the largest subject population in its history. And it had all started with one human child reaching for food to feed her hungry neighbors. Sir, Sub-Commander Krelgax spoke quietly, perhaps it's time to consider that the humans may not be governable through traditional methods. Vextor wanted to disagree, wanted to assert that Imperial doctrine would eventually prevail. But the evidence was overwhelming. The humans had proven immune to intimidation, resistant to pressure, and willing to accept death rather than submit to injustice. For the first time in 3 centuries, the Caltharian Empire faced an enemy it couldn't defeat through fear. The question now was what to do about it. The Imperial Council chamber on Calthar Prime had witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations, but never had its obsidian walls echoed with such heated debate. Supreme Admiral Korak stood before the Council of 12, his ancient hands gripping a data tablet containing reports that threatened to shatter the Empire's carefully constructed reality. 17 systems, he announced, his voice carrying across the vast chamber. 3 billion humans. Complete cessation of cooperation across every sector of Imperial administration. And it all began with the death of one human child. Council Prime Zerath, eldest of the Caltharian rulers, shifted on his crystalline throne. Explain how one dead juvenile has paralyzed a quarter of our economic infrastructure. The humans possess cultural characteristics that our xenopsychology departments failed to properly assess, Korax replied. They form emotional bonds with individuals they've never met, based on shared identity markers. The death of Sarah Chen triggered what they call collective grief across their entire species. Collective grief? Council member THRYSS spoke with disdain. Are we seriously discussing the emotional states of slave populations? We are discussing the complete breakdown of imperial authority across the largest territory expansion in our history, Korax snapped. Human labor supports 37% of our military production, 41% of our resource extraction operations, and 63% of our technological development programs. Without their cooperation, we face economic collapse within months. The chamber fell silent as the council processed the implications. The Caltharian Empire had built its expansion on the backs of conquered species, but never before had one group represented such a critical percentage of imperial infrastructure. Status of military suppression operations, asked Council Member Vexnos. Suspended pending strategic reassessment. Our ground forces reported unprecedented hesitation when ordered to fire on human gatherings containing children. Multiple unit commanders requested clarification of engagement parameters. Hesitation? Council Prime Zarath's voice grew dangerous. Our soldiers hesitated to follow orders? The humans deliberately placed their young at the front of their demonstrations. Our troops found themselves unable to target enemy positions that included what appeared to be non-combatant juveniles. The concept was alien to the Caltharian mindset. Their own young were sequestered and protected until they reached military age, then immediately inducted into service. The idea of deliberately exposing children to danger for political purposes should have been incomprehensible. Yet the humans had done exactly that, and somehow made it appear noble rather than tactical. Recommendations? Council Prime Zarath demanded. That's where we encounter our primary problem, Korax admitted. Standard Imperial doctrine provides no framework for dealing with a population that chooses death over compliance. He activated the chamber's holodisplay, showing feeds from human gathering sites across the galaxy. Billions of humans stood in defiance of Imperial authority, their children among them, holding pictures of the dead and singing songs of mourning and resistance. They're not negotiating, Korax continued. They're not making demands. They're simply refusing to cooperate while documenting our every action for broadcast to their species network. Then, we escalate pressure until they break, suggested Council Member Draxtar. With what leverage? We've already demonstrated our willingness to kill their children. They've responded by placing more children in our target zones while teaching them to face death with courage. Every escalation we attempt seems to strengthen their resolve rather than weaken it. Council Member THRYSS leaned forward. Are you suggesting that the mighty Caltharian Empire cannot defeat a species of primitives? I'm suggesting that our definition of defeat may not apply to humans. They appear to possess a cultural concept called victory in death, where being killed for their beliefs is considered a form of triumph. The chamber erupted in confused discussion. The idea of finding victory in defeat was beyond Caltharian comprehension. Their entire military philosophy was based on survival through dominance, strength through fear, victory through overwhelming force. Furthermore, Korax continued, once order was restored, intelligence reports suggest that human resistance capabilities were significantly underestimated during initial occupation planning. The holodisplay shifted to show tactical assessments from across human space. Hidden weapon caches, concealed communication networks, underground tunnels and safe houses, all revealed in the wake of Sarachen's death. The scope of human preparation was staggering. They've been planning this for how long? Council Prime Zarath asked. Based on the complexity and coordination involved, possibly since before our first ships arrived in their space. Every human who worked on Imperial infrastructure installations included hidden access points for their own use. Every human technician who maintained our equipment installed backdoors in our systems. Every human administrator who managed our databases created copies for their own networks. The implications hit the Council like a physical blow. The humans hadn't simply been conquered subjects, they'd been infiltrators from the beginning, gathering intelligence and preparing for eventual resistance while appearing to cooperate. Sir, interrupted an aide rushing into the chamber, urgent reports from across human space. The new data painted an even grimmer picture. Human work crews had abandoned critical Imperial installations on 17 worlds. Essential services were failing as human technicians walked away from their posts. Most catastrophically, humans working in Imperial weapons facilities had activated hidden sabotage protocols before disappearing. Estimated timeline for critical system failures? Council Prime Zarath asked. 72 hours for essential services, 1 week for military production capabilities, 1 month for total infrastructure collapse in affected systems. The chamber fell into stunned silence. The humans had transformed themselves from an asset into a weapon, and they'd done it in response to the death of a single child. Options for rapid replacement of human labor, asked Council Member Vexnos. Non-existent in the short term. Human adaptability allowed them to fill roles that other species cannot immediately assume. Their loss creates bottlenecks across multiple critical systems. Council Prime Zerath stood slowly, his ancient form radiating authority and barely contained fury. Are you telling this council that 3 billion humans have successfully held the Empire hostage by threatening to commit suicide? In essence, yes. They've demonstrated that they're willing to accept complete species extinction rather than submit to what they consider unjust governance. Then, we accommodate their desire for extinction. Sir, with respect, that would solve nothing. Dead humans cannot maintain our infrastructure. Furthermore, intelligence suggests that other subject species are monitoring the situation closely. If we resort to genocide, we may face similar resistance from species that previously considered rebellion futile. The deeper implications became clear. The Empire's power structure depended on the perception of invincibility. If humans could defy imperial authority and force negotiations, other species might attempt similar resistance. Bring me solutions, Council Prime Zerath commanded, not problems. Admiral Korax consulted his data tablet. Our xenopsychology departments have prepared several recommendations, though all carry significant risks. Proceed. Option 1, complete withdrawal from human space, allowing them to govern themselves while maintaining trade relationships. This preserves economic benefits while eliminating the resistance problem. Unacceptable. The Empire does not retreat. Option 2, negotiated autonomy within imperial structure. Humans maintain internal self-governance while acknowledging imperial sovereignty for external affairs. Also unacceptable. It establishes precedent for other species to demand similar arrangements. Option 3, cultural integration rather than domination. Incorporate human social structures into imperial governance while adapting our methods to accommodate their psychological characteristics. Council member THRYSS laughed harshly. Are you seriously suggesting we modify imperial doctrine to suit the emotional needs of conquered primitives? I'm suggesting that our current doctrine is demonstrably ineffective against human resistance patterns. We can continue attempting to force compliance through methods that have already failed, or we can adapt our approach to achieve imperial objectives through alternative means. The debate that followed raged for hours, with council members arguing between tradition and pragmatism, pride and necessity. But, throughout the discussion, reports continued arriving of escalating resistance across human space. On Earth, the crowds had swelled to include nearly half the planet's population. Similar gatherings were reported from every human colony and settlement. Most disturbing of all, humans in mixed-species communities were beginning to share their resistance techniques with other conquered populations. Sir, reported another aide, were receiving requests for clarification from governors across the Empire. The Drachmary and the Vega system are asking why humans are allowed to gather without punishment. The Velthari and the Centauri colonies are questioning whether imperial law applies equally to all species. The nightmare scenario was beginning to unfold. Human defiance was inspiring other species to question imperial authority, creating potential for system-wide rebellion that could tear the Empire apart. Furthermore, the aide continued, we've detected unusual quantum signatures suggesting that human communication networks have established contact with pre-conquest human exploration vessels still operating in deep space. Explain. Intelligence estimates suggest that between 200 and 500 human ships escaped initial occupation forces and have been operating independently for the past 18 months. They appear to be coordinating with resistance networks and may be planning military intervention. The revelation changed everything. The Empire wasn't just facing passive resistance from conquered populations, they were potentially facing active military intervention by free human forces who had never been subjugated. Military assessment of human naval capabilities? Council Prime Zerath demanded. Limited but potentially problematic. Human ship design philosophy emphasizes adaptability and independent operation rather than overwhelming firepower. In conventional fleet engagements, they would be easily defeated. However, their vessels appear optimized for guerrilla warfare and hit-and-run tactics. Numbers? Unknown. Human exploration fleets were organized in autonomous units designed for extended independent operation. They could have established hidden bases anywhere in unexplored space. The chamber fell silent as the council processed the scope of their problem. They weren't just facing a rebellion, they were potentially facing a war against an enemy that had been preparing for 2 years while appearing to cooperate. Time frame for potential human military intervention? Unknown, but intelligence suggests coordination is already underway. The hidden communication networks that triggered current resistance activities appear to be facilitating contact with external human forces. Council Prime Zairath closed his eyes, feeling the weight of 3 centuries of imperial expansion pressing down on his shoulders. The Empire had faced rebellions before, but never one that threatened the fundamental assumptions underlying their power structure. Admiral Korax, prepare contingency plans for all discussed options. We reconvene in 6 hours. As the council dispersed, reports continued flooding in from across human space. The death of Saracen had done more than trigger an uprising, it had revealed that the Caltharian Empire had never truly conquered humanity at all. They had merely driven them underground, where they had been waiting for the right moment to emerge and remind the galaxy what humans were capable of when pushed too far. The Empire was about to discover that some species were simply ungovernable, no matter how much force was applied. And, in the depths of space, hidden human fleets received the signal they had been waiting for since the day their homeworld fell. The time for hiding was over. The time for reclamation had begun. The hidden human fleet had been drifting in the empty space between star systems for 2 years, maintaining radio silence and running on minimal power to avoid detection. 300 ships of various sizes, from massive exploration vessels to tiny research craft, all carrying the last free humans in known space. They had been waiting for a signal that might never come, hoping for news from their conquered homeworld, preparing for a war they might not survive. Commander Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the converted exploration ship Defiant Hope, watching as quantum communication arrays across the fleet activated simultaneously. The message they received was simple but devastating: Saracen was dead, killed by Caltharian forces while trying to feed hungry children. But, attached to that message was something that changed everything: video feeds showing billions of humans standing in open defiance of the Empire. Analysis, she commanded, studying the tactical displays showing human gatherings across 17 star systems. It's real, Commander, reported her intelligence officer. The resistance networks have gone active across all occupied systems. Estimated participation is over 3 billion humans. Casualties? Remarkably few. Imperial forces appear to be hesitating to fire on crowds containing human children. Elena felt a grim smile cross her face. The underground resistance had learned well from human history. They were using the Empire's own brutal reputation against them, forcing Caltharian soldiers to confront the moral implications of their orders. Fleet status? All ships report ready for Operation Homecoming. The Caltharian Empire has no idea we exist, and their forces are concentrated on suppressing civilian demonstrations. Elena looked around the bridge of her ship, noting the mixture of hope and determination on her crew's faces. They had been refugees for 2 years, carrying the last remnants of human military capability into the dark between the stars. Now they had a chance to return home. Communications, open a channel to the entire fleet. Channel open, Commander. This is Commander Vasquez to all ships. 2 years ago, we watched our homeworld fall to an empire that ruled through fear and murder. Today, we've learned that our people on Earth and across human space have stood up to that empire. They're not waiting for rescue, they're demanding justice. She paused, thinking of Saracen and the millions of other humans who had died under Imperial rule. The child who died was 12 years old. Her name was Saracen, and she died trying to feed hungry people. The Empire killed her for showing compassion, and, in doing so, they revealed their true nature to the galaxy. Across the fleet, men and women who had carried the burden of exile listened to their commander's words with growing intensity. Today we go home. not as conquerors, but as liberators. Not to rule, but to free. The Caltharian Empire believes that terror is the ultimate weapon. We're going to teach them about a weapon more powerful than fear, hope backed by righteous anger. The response across the fleet was immediate. Ship after ship reported ready status as crews prepared for the journey home. The human fleet began moving toward Earth, their ships dispersing into formation patterns that would bring them into the Sol system from 17 different vectors. On Earth, the resistance had evolved beyond simple demonstration. The death of Saracen had triggered something unprecedented in galactic history, the complete withdrawal of cooperation by an entire species. Humans simply stopped following Imperial orders, stopped maintaining Imperial equipment, stopped pretending to accept Imperial authority. Captain Vextor stood on the bridge of the Shadowfall, watching helplessly as human civilization transformed itself before his eyes. Imperial installations across Earth were being abandoned as human workers walked away from their posts. Critical systems were failing as maintenance schedules were ignored. Most disturbing of all, the humans weren't hiding anymore. "Sir, we're detecting massive movement across the planet's surface," reported his sensor officer. "Humans are emerging from concealment in numbers far exceeding our population estimates." "How many?" "Unknown, sir. Our sensors indicate at least 8 billion humans are now visible, but the number continues climbing." Vextor felt his blood run cold. Imperial intelligence had estimated Earth's population at 4 billion humans. If 8 billion were now visible, how many were still hidden? How badly had the Empire miscalculated the scope of human civilization? "Sir, urgent transmission from Admiral Korth." The Admiral's image appeared on screen, his expression grim. "Captain, we have a problem. Long-range sensors are detecting unidentified ships approaching the Sol system. Multiple vectors, stealth configurations, estimated arrival in 18 hours. Human ships? Almost certainly. Intelligence estimates suggest we're looking at the remainder of human exploration fleets that escaped initial conquest operations." The implications hit Vextor like a physical blow. The Empire was about to face coordinated resistance from both the occupied population and external military forces. Every tactical manual he'd studied warned against fighting enemies on two fronts simultaneously. Fleet strength? Unknown, but preliminary analysis suggests several hundred vessels of various sizes. They're using some form of stealth technology that's interfering with our sensors. Vextor studied the tactical display showing Earth's defiant cities. Recommendations? Supreme Command is ordering immediate evacuation of all non-essential Imperial personnel from human space. We're to maintain minimum occupation forces while civilian populations are relocated to secure systems. We're retreating? We're conducting a strategic withdrawal to more defensible positions while the Council determines long-term policy regarding human resistance. The words tasted like ash in Vextor's mouth. The Caltharian Empire didn't retreat. They advanced, conquered, and held territory through superior force. The idea of abandoning conquered space because the inhabitants refused to cooperate was unprecedented. "Sir," his communications officer interrupted, "we're receiving a transmission from the human fleet. They're requesting communication with Imperial Command." On screen, the image that appeared showed a human female in what appeared to be military dress. Her expression was calm but determined, and her eyes held the same fearless quality that Vextor had seen in the crowds below. "This is Commander Elena Vasquez of the Human Liberation Fleet. I'm transmitting on all frequencies to ensure this message reaches Imperial Command." Vextor found himself studying her features, noting the composed manner that reminded him uncomfortably of Caltharian military bearing. This was not the terrified primitive he had expected to face. "We are aware of current resistance activities across human space," Commander Vasquez continued. "We are also aware that Imperial forces have been ordered to withdraw from human territories. This is wise, as it demonstrates that the Empire is capable of learning." However, her tone grew harder. The Empire's crimes against humanity cannot be ignored. The murder of children, the enslavement of populations, the deliberate infliction of suffering, these actions demand accountability. Vextor felt a chill run down his spine. The human was speaking not as a desperate refugee but as a representative of legitimate authority. She was treating the Empire as an equal power rather than an irresistible force. We offer the following terms: complete withdrawal of Imperial forces from all human territories, immediate release of all human prisoners, and reparations for damages inflicted during occupation. In return, we will allow Imperial forces safe passage from human space and will not pursue military action beyond our own territories. The arrogance was breathtaking. A few hundred human ships were offering terms to an empire that commanded millions of vessels across dozens of star systems. Yet something in the commander's manner suggested she wasn't bluffing. If these terms are not accepted within 72 hours, we will consider Imperial forces in human space to be legitimate military targets. We will also extend assistance to other species seeking liberation from Imperial rule. The transmission ended, leaving Vextor staring at a blank screen. The humans weren't just demanding independence, they were threatening to export their resistance to other conquered species. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "preliminary analysis of human fleet composition is concerning." "Explain." "Their ships appear to be heavily modified exploration vessels, but the modifications include weapon systems we can't identify. Furthermore, their approach vectors suggest sophisticated understanding of our detection capabilities." "Recommendation?" "Unknown, sir. We have no tactical data on human military capabilities. They've been operating independently for 2 years, and we don't know what technologies they've developed." From across the galaxy, reports flooded into Imperial command. Human workers were abandoning their posts on every occupied world. Essential services were failing. Critical military installations were being evacuated as human technicians revealed hidden sabotage devices throughout Imperial infrastructure. But, most disturbing of all, other conquered species were beginning to ask questions. Why were humans allowed to defy Imperial authority? Why were Imperial forces withdrawing from human space? What made humans different from every other conquered species? On the Imperial homeworld, the Council of 12 faced a decision that would determine the Empire's future. They could escalate the conflict, potentially triggering a war that would spread across all conquered territories. They could negotiate, setting a precedent that might encourage rebellion from other species. Or they could attempt to find a third option that preserved Imperial authority while accommodating human demands. Council Prime Zayrath stood before the assembled council, holding reports that painted a grim picture of Imperial capabilities in human space. "Analysis indicates that human resistance has reached critical mass," he announced. "Further attempts at suppression may trigger galaxy-wide rebellion." "Are you suggesting we negotiate with terrorists?" asked Council Member THRYSS. "I'm suggesting we face reality. The humans have demonstrated that they cannot be governed through fear. They've also demonstrated that their resistance capabilities were severely underestimated. Continuing the current approach risks the stability of the entire empire." The debate that followed would be remembered in Imperial history as the moment the Empire's expansion finally encountered limits. For 3 centuries, the Caltharians had believed that sufficient force could overcome any resistance. The humans had proven that belief false. In the end, the decision was unanimous. The Empire would withdraw from human space, not out of weakness but out of recognition that some species were simply ungovernable. The precedent was dangerous, but the alternative was worse. The withdrawal took 6 months and was conducted under the watchful eyes of the Human Liberation Fleet. Imperial forces evacuated installations across 17 star systems while billions of humans worked to rebuild their civilization. There were no reprisals, no last-minute attempts at revenge. The Empire simply left, acknowledging that their experiment in human governance had failed. Commander Vasquez stood on the observation deck of the Defiant Hope as it entered Earth's orbit, watching the blue marble that had been humanity's prison for 2 years. Below, humans were emerging from hiding places throughout the planet, rebuilding cities, reconnecting with family members they'd thought lost. The cost had been enormous. Millions of humans had died during the occupation. Entire cities had been destroyed. Cultural sites had been demolished. But humanity had survived, and, more importantly, they had maintained their fundamental character. Sarah Chen's grave became a memorial not just to her but to all the innocent who had died under imperial rule. Children from across human space brought flowers and pictures, creating a shrine that reminded future generations of the price of freedom and the importance of standing up to injustice. The Caltharian Empire continued to exist, but it was changed. Other conquered species had watched the human resistance with interest, and several began organizing their own independence movements. The Empire's expansion ceased as resources were diverted to suppressing internal dissent. Years later, xenopsychologists would study the human resistance as a case study in the power of collective action driven by shared values. The death of one child had triggered a response that ultimately liberated an entire species and changed the balance of power across the galaxy. But, perhaps the most important lesson was simpler, that terror only worked against those who could be terrorized. And humans, when faced with the choice between freedom and safety, had chosen freedom every time. The Empire had ruled through fear for 3 centuries. Humanity had defeated them with hope, courage, and the unshakable belief that some things were worth dying for. Sarah Chen's name was remembered long after the empire that killed her had faded into irrelevance. And children across human space learned that sometimes, the smallest acts of compassion could change the course of history. The galaxy had learned what happened when an unstoppable force met an immovable spirit. The spirit won.